so we can have this uploaded later. Lovely. Okay, so the topic for today, and I'll be paying attention to voice channel chat too as well. Killswitch is like, hey, let me get my mango guava juice going. So the topic for today, we're going to be discussing, again, rogue players and alliances. And I want to start off, it's like I'll be reading these. Yeah, mod on duty. Nice. What's the, hang on, what's the, oh god, what's the, hang on, I gotta get you one sec. Here we go. There's Gilgamesh. Anyways, so the topic today, as I said, we're going to be talking about rogue players and alliances. Now, I want to start off with just somewhat of a history lesson, as we typically do, just before we kind of really dive into, the meat of it all, and then we kind of get to the Q&A portion for players as far as when you would like, or better yet, if you deal or have been dealing with any rogue players and alliances, because I'll definitely answer any specific questions that you have a little bit later once we kind of get through the outline portion. So if you want to give me, your specific example of what you're currently dealing with, and you want to ask, a question, or, just get some advice on how you might be able to deal with your current rogue alliance or player, then again, we'll definitely have an opportunity for that towards the end. Where I'll kind of take anyone and everyone's, specific situation, and just give you my thoughts on it. So we're going to start off just essentially talking about kind of what is a rogue player and or alliance, right? Because some people, I think, will blatantly label alliances and or players as rogues, and they may not necessarily be rogues. So what I usually define a rogue alliance or player as is individuals that are going against the wave, right? They are going against the majority that is looking, right, that could either be, unified, they could be united, right? They could all have common goals they believe in, and they're essentially the minority or the only ones that are going against it, right? Regardless of if they have, the good or ill intentions, right? And it's more of a generalization. So as an example, let's say if you look at like the two sides of the fence, you have one side of the fence that has players, or let's just say groups of alliances that are all wanting a peaceful server, for example. And then you have one player, a couple of players, or even up to one alliance, or maybe even a few, that are still within that minority that don't really care for a peaceful server, right? They just want war, right? Or they just want to fight. They want to be able to do PvP whenever they want. This is the more common of the examples that you typically will find in servers. Or you could, I should say, could find in servers. The other side of the fence is, let's say it's the opposite. Let's say you have a war server, but your alliance, or you have, an alliance or one or two alliances that don't want to fight, right? They want peace. So even though you have good intentions, you still technically would be the arguable rogues at that point because you're in the minority. And right, it goes so much deeper than that, mainly because the way that servers are developing, right, most of the time you are going to see that the majority group, right, or the first big majority of like-minded leaders, right, and or officers if it extends that far, but for the most part leaders, that see eye to eye is going to be your first government body, so to speak, right, your first managing body in the server. Because typically if you are the strongest, if you have the most amount of players, right, and you have the most amount of people, leads more specifically, that see eye to eye on things, that will most of the time, more often than not, end up with, okay, now it's a matter of what does this group want to do, right? What are they going to say that's kind of going to be the law of the land? Now, this is very standard. It's very typical for what you're going to experience in any type of Kingdom Builder. Now, most players, if you're just a regular member, right, if you're joining the game for the first time, if you are playing a Kingdom Builder, you probably have no idea that these things are going on. Even if you're someone who's listening right now and maybe you've never done management for a server or for a kingdom, if you've never been an officer, if you've never been a leader, if you've never put together a kingdom or a server Discord, if you've never had open council chats, right, with multiple other leaders, you would have no idea that these high-level discussions and decisions are even happening in your server. You're probably thinking to yourself, man, I'm just grinding away, leveling up my castle. Man, my troop power is getting really high. I can finally go and attack this. I can finally go and one-shot this level 2 gnome boss, right? Like those are more of your personal, immediate goals, personal goals that you have for your account's development and for you as a player. But this is why it's so much deeper than that. When you really start getting into, and I don't want to necessarily say the politics of a server, even though I'm sure it could probably be defaultly labeled as such. It's really just more about how is it going to be, like, is there an attempt at all to manage the server and to have some kind of governing body, or is it just going to be an FFA, right, like what you would find in somewhere like a server 5, gosh, I think... Oh man, I can't remember. Someone told me there's a few other servers that that were rogue, and I'm totally forgetting the names. I want to give a shout out to some of these other war servers. But there's at least 2 other war servers outside of 5 that you'll find. Right, there's no structure at all. Like they don't care to communicate with each other. It's just 24/7, like 7-Eleven, all out fighting. And so because of that, right, there's no standards. There's no expectations, so to speak, on getting somewhere to end game, because it's all about the right here and the right now, right? What is directly in front of them. Now, how this, again, ties back into how you're classifying a rogue player in Alliance is because, again, it focuses on, right, who was the first big majority group in your server, because, again, they're going to be the defining presence on most likely how that server is going to pan out, albeit any kind of unintended or impeding factors that come in where maybe they get dethroned or anything. But for the most part, right, the first big majority group is going to be the ones that are going to have the presence, right? And then it's just a matter of, keep up. I mean, again, for the regular player, it may not affect you that much unless the server ends up turning into, free-for-all server-wide PvP. Right, and we'll touch a little bit on that later, but for the most part, right, that's the big thing to take away, is that for the TLDR is whoever the smallest minority group is usually going to be categorized as the rogue players and or alliances if they are actively going against the majority, right? Or where the direction of the server is going into. Now, why do rogue players go rogue in the first place? And then we'll take some questions on these 2 topics. So, rogue players typically, and this is, again, usually what happens in servers, is that you will have a player that, for example, if you're in, somewhat of a peaceful server, let's say you don't have server-wide PvP, let's say you're, limiting your kill events, which would be your contention of lords, and then your stage 5 or your day 5 of King of the Hill, which lasts 2 days, right? Let's say you limit your kill events to the forbidden zone in the middle, right? But you have some players who just want a lot of PvP. Maybe they're not getting a lot of action for whatever reason, right? It could be from management or not, right? It could be based on how policies are set up, but they just want to go out there and fight. And because of that, they now decided for themselves that, they're just going to disregard your rules. They're going to go out and attack, anyone and everyone, right, regardless of what the current limitations are for that kill event, right? That would be that would be a reason why you might find some people that would go rogue. On the opposite end, let's say you have people that really want peace, but they're in a server where they're fighting nonstop. They may decide, unfortunately, that they may need to fight, right? If they want to get what they want, right? Especially if you're in, let's say you're in somewhat of a kind of a neutral server where you're still defining what the makeup or the direction of your server is going to go in. And let's say that there's really no overwhelming majority. You might have one side of alliances that wants more PvP, then you could have another side of alliances that just wants peace, right? And you could go to war for that, because oftentimes what you'll find in servers is that the big reason why civil war or even just alliance wars break out is because they're essentially vying for majority control of a server. this is what usually happens, right? When you're really talking about kind of, grand, more kingdom-wide strategy and views for how you want to develop a server, that is typically the majority reason why you would have wars break out, right? You're vying for control, in short, of the server. And players may feel that maybe diplomacy was attempted, maybe it wasn't attempted. If it was attempted, then of course it's even worse that obviously it breaks down to that, right, that there wasn't any kind of common ground that was able to be found. But again, right, it's standard, right? It's something that can happen. So, right, those are a few examples of why rogue players would go rogue. And for the short version there is, it's just a difference of opinion, right? The thing you have to approach with very realistic, very realistic expectations is that, you're playing in a server with tens of thousands of players. And right, and from what we've calculated, right, at least around 50,000 minimum, if not more players, right, at least new accounts that are being populated into a server before a new server opens. And usually they're going off of a timeline, not necessarily an amount, even though, that'd be cool if they did. The understanding there is because you have all these different individuals that may all think differently. Right. If you think about the 28 people that are here, 27, however many, right? If you think if all of us got put onto an island and we had to develop a thriving ecosystem, right, and a stable government and actually survive, right? What do you think is going to happen? The example I usually give a lot of people is if you have watched TV shows like Lost, if you've watched The 100, I'm sure there's other examples out there as well. But in these particular examples, right, these are shows that are based around individuals that are a group of individuals that are essentially being placed in an area, a piece of land, a territory, and they have to think about what are they going to do, right? What's their next step? Well, they have to get food, right? They have to do water. They have to find shelter, right? You're going to have people that will probably be more outspoken than others, right? You're going to have the passives. You're going to have the more aggressive people. You'll have people that are more proactive. You'll have people that are just kind of more reactive. And because of that, right, you're going to have more vocal leaders, and then you're going to have, more silent types as well. And right, then you'll start defining like who are the alphas, who are not, right? Who are the people that really want to be either helpful or they just want to, lead, in a sense, right? And so all of those things, right? And then, if you break out and let's say your big group is there and you break out into smaller groups, what happens then, right? Then maybe you need to appoint a representative to be the talking or the primary rep for your group of people. All of those things can happen. And so because of that, that's also the other reason why, rogues in a server, even though it's kind of a general label, right, it can happen more often than not just from general disagreements on opinions of how you want a server to develop, for why you can end up having them in the first place. Okay, so that I think covers the second topic. I'll open the floor up now for any questions on any of the two topics I've discussed. Again, we'll open it up for the big mumba jumba of people giving me their specific situations of what you're currently dealing with in your server. We're going to do that later. But if you have a question on one of those first two topics, which is, what's a rogue player alliance, and then, why do rogues go rogue in the first place, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we will move on. And if you're raising your hand, I'll call on someone as well. Again, you just have to be a current member or existing member of the server. If you're new or you're a visitor, we just won't be calling on you, but you're more than welcome to ask a question in the voice channel chat if you join the Discord, and we're happy to answer that for you as well. Ooh. Oh my gosh. I picked up some fresh squeezed orange juice from my local Sam's Club. There's this guy there, really nice. His name's Jerry, coincidentally. And I think like a couple days a week, he'll just take a bunch of like just raw, just beautifully ripe oranges, and he'll just manually squeeze them all out. It's absolutely fantastic. Sorry, side random note there. All right, let me take a look at voice channel chat. Let me just see if there are any questions, and then if not, we will move on to the next two topics before we kind of get to the good stuff. Let me see. You know, I thought that a rogue alliance means that one red alliance who always fights everyone nonstop. 20%. That's why I quit playing on my S56 account. Now it's just a test account. I mean, you know, I think that's in Tristan, for your example. I think that is just one example of again, right, how you could classify a specific situation or a specific alliance as a type of rogue alliance if they just want to fight everyone. But like I said, most of it really comes down to, right, like, I mean, they just need to kind of be in the minority for the most part. I mean, if your server doesn't have any structure, if there's no organization, if there's no group of alliances that have similar thoughts and processes on how they want to go about developing the server, then, you know, having one alliance that's going out there and attacking everyone, I don't really know if I would consider them rogue per se. You know, because they're not necessarily going against any majority because there is no majority, right? They're just going out and kind of playing or doing whatever they want, for the most part. I mean, again, I think it's still going to have negative consequences for the server and players there that are getting attacked by them, of course. But I wouldn't classify that specific example as someone going rogue. So Gilgamesh, you do ask. Gilgamesh asks a good question. So Gilgamesh, 2 invisible points for you. Well, I don't necessarily know if it's a question, but more of a statement-based question, I guess. Gilgamesh says, if everyone chooses the same color, then wouldn't that cut down on war? Can anyone give me an example of a reason why, if everyone goes on the same color, why fighting or how fighting could still break out? And then also any negative consequences that could have for your server. Does anyone have a guess? And you're more than welcome to write that down in the voice channel chat if you'd like. If you're raising your hand, again, we'll call on people that are currently here. Let me see. Tito Man YouTube. Okay, let's go ahead and bring you on if you're still here. Let's see. Tito, what's up? You're on the show. Never mind. That's okay. I get stage fright sometimes too. You're more than welcome back though. Or if you'd like, you can ask your question in the voice channel chat, of course. Sonos said, guess here was lose players. All won't fit in the one alliance. More rogues can become of a one-color server. Yes, I would say the second point there probably is somewhat likely. The challenge with if you put everyone into one faction, not only are the other two factions going to have negative unintended consequences because of the fact that if you're running a one faction based server, which is similar to a mega alliance, except in this case it would actually be more of a mega faction. Wow, I'm having like the biggest Jimmy Neutron brain blast moment right now, and these epiphanies are just flying left and right. So, right, in a server where you would typically have, or you would see something like a mega alliance type structure, whether it be 1 or 2 alliances, and that basically just means that you're funneling in all your spenders, all your top players into like 1 or 2 alliances at the top, and because of that they're winning all the events. That's going to have negative consequences on players as well, because because you're going to have a group of players always in every server that if they feel like if the alliance they're in is never having a shot at placing high or even winning, alliance-based events that are server-wide, right, that can cause players to move servers, migrate out, stop playing their account, re-roll. In addition, if you have everyone that goes into one faction, similar things can happen, right? If that one faction is constantly winning COR, right, and then no one else is, what does that do for the other two factions? Keep in mind that the majority of players in a server, 99.9% of all players, are always going to be free to play. Because of that, most of the free to play, if not 99%, are probably not going to spend the 2K green gems to switch factions, right? They're more likely to stay in the faction they're in, try to condense in alliances, or if they just find out, right, this isn't even worse, this is more of an in addition to, if you focus on just one faction for your server, that can cause those other players who now know that they're probably not going to win COR, in addition to other potential events for the players that are remaining there in those alliances, that can also be a big detriment for why those players would then leave. They would migrate out sooner, or they would just stop playing their accounts and then re-roll, right? Or worst case, uninstall. So, right, those are things that are really just generalities as far as how you should be looking at trying to keep good activity in your server. Even if the thought was to try to reduce rogue players by going to one faction, you could find out that the unintended consequences of it would probably be more drastic than some may think. So my recommendation would probably just be to not do that. But again, sometimes it's not always within control. It also depends on how your server and the people that are in your server are going to be developing, right? If they want to work together or not. Okay, let me get to my next topic. So next topic we're going to be going into is, where's my outline here? What are the short and long-term impacts of rogues? So does anyone have a guess on what some of the short-term impacts would be from rogue players, right? If you have some rogues in your servers, whether it's some players or an alliance, what do you think are some immediate impacts that can happen in your server, let's just say within the first week or two? Right? Any guesses? Okay, Jesse says destroy small members until they quit. Anyone else? Does anyone else have a guess on what some of the impacts can be of rogue players that have started their roguish activities within the first week or two of a server? Anyone else? I'll give it about 15 or 20 more seconds in case anyone else has a guess. Come pick some fruit. I do want to go pick some fruit, to be honest. Feeling a little parched, actually. So, okay, there's a few more people that are typing. Let's see here. Soon, let me see. Also, if it isn't fixed soon, they could cause dismay among the leaders in the server. Okay. Okay. I think that might be a little bit more kind of going towards long term, but could be something that we talk. Killswitch says, depends on the size of the rogues too. Yes, no, it does. So, in any example, right, where Area said take away their cities and they dissolve or stop playing rogue. Area, okay, no, Area has a good point as well. So, and we'll build off that a little bit, which is, right, some of the immediate effects that if a rogue player and or alliance ends up starting, right, their ill intentions or their activities, if you will, is, again, let's say that they start taking away player cities, or they start taking away alliance cities, right? Maybe they do it randomly. Maybe they target specific alliances, and because of that, right now players are seeing that their cities are being taken, and some and more. I don't want to necessarily say more often than not, but you will most likely have a group of players that would probably expect your alliance to retake those cities. And let's say that you are a more medium to smaller alliance, and maybe it's one of the higher ranked alliances that goes rogue, and let's say you're just not strong enough to retake the city. But players may be wondering, well, why haven't we gone to retake the city? Or why are we getting attacked? All of those things can cause players to either lower activity if it continues for a while. Maybe they'll leave your alliance and join a higher ranked one because maybe they'll think there's less likely of a chance that they will have a city attacked, or maybe less likely of a chance that they'll personally get attacked. Worst case, it could just cause them to maybe re-roll on the server if it ends up staying for too long. But immediate impacts is leadership may start getting questioned. They may start wondering why they're being attacked or why this is happening, and you might find that some players in the interim may just leave your alliance to try and join a higher one, or you'll just constantly be getting dealt with questions. And then I imagine there would probably be the small amount of people that will probably be a little more understanding. Other areas that you can find challenges with is if, let's say, you are in a unified server. Let's say you have some form of structure, and you are trying to implement some of those things, right? That can cause delays for your group as a whole. Because delays are being caused, players have to come in now with more realistic expectations on, this is something that's happening, and it's obviously something that has to be dealt with, right? You can't be impatient and just, snap your fingers and everything's going to be hunky-dory, right? Especially if you're dealing with, let's say, more persistent rogue players or people that are in it a little bit more for the long haul. And I'll give an example on that later. So because of that, right now you could potentially be stressing out leadership, right? You could stress out your management, which would be your officers and your R6s, right? And then also depending on how you're going to address it overall. So again, those are two situations that can happen immediately. Along with that, some of the additional, I'd say another big third area that you could end up having put out there is the publicity. Right, you may also have players that are talking constantly in World Chat and Kingdom Chat about how, the server is going to shiitake mushrooms. And they could be just now saying, oh, well, the server's done with, it's over, it's the end of the world, right? Gosh, I always see those. Those are the funniest. And so, those are things that can happen. And because that negative message or that negative propaganda is being spread, that can have unintended consequences in the short term that bleed into the long term. So, exactly, Chicken Little all day long. That's more or less what you'll have. Some people will think, and part of that is because of just the the lack of knowledge or the lack of experience in playing in servers that kind of meet obstacles. Right? If you're a player who hasn't been in a server that has actually had to deal with challenges, right? You may just think, this is like the worst thing since, a player was just constantly zeroing you or out to aim for you every day, and you're just wondering why they are. And really, it's not that bad. And we'll again talk about that a little bit. So those are a few of the short-term goals. Short-term consequences and effects that can happen from players that are kind of immediately, or for any players or alliances that initially do go rogue. Now, some of the long-term effects could be anything from really, which is probably the number one thing that would happen in any server, is you just losing activity. Right? Players that are now being either expected to or being asked to fight, right, for the betterment of the server, to hopefully save it, right, is then the next biggest, or probably the next tallest order that you would do. Especially if your server is in a situation where you can actually win against the rogue players or the alliances, however many there may be, and you can actually save the server, right? If you have that opportunity, then that is really the probably most challenging selling point, especially to new players, because they may not know about, that these things can happen, right? The server can actually be saved, right? We just have to be persistent and keep it going and, really just kind of persevere, right, together through the trenches. Some players may not know that. And they might just say to themselves, "Oh, this is just getting too much. I don't want to sit here and fight all the time." And you're no matter what, you are always going to lose activity, right? That just has to be the understanding. Really, what it comes down to, from once your server opens to however long it stays open until the next server opens, that is your opportunity to get and bring in as many human beings as possible, and then after that, it's really just about mitigating the bleed, right? You're constantly doing patchwork, because until your server hits 90 days and migration opens, right? You are trying to manage and retain as many players as humanly possible. And so when things like this happen, that's one of the biggest detriments. Like doing that, server-wide PvP, or if you do like a server-wide kill event, or even if it's just a lawless server where you just have free-for-all, it's just free-for-all KE 24/7, right? Some of those two big topics there, or two big situations, along with you having rogue players or alliances that are essentially going around attacking anyone and everyone, right? Those are probably the three, I would say the three biggest, if not about the biggest, scenarios that can happen for servers that are just activity killers. And because of that, right, that's just something that just really has to be understood for some of the long-term impacts, right? Along with potentially crumbling leadership. I mean, you know, you're going to test leadership's perseverance in staying the course, right? Our alliance is going to keep fighting because they know that they have to in order to get, you know, to the light at the end of the tunnel. Are they going to fold? Will they leave? Will they change leadership? Will they you know, stop fighting against the rogues and, you know, either play like the Swiss neutral card or maybe even join their side, right? I mean, there's a lot of, really, if anything, it's more psychological. It's more mental pressure that you're dealing with, more so than it actually is, you know, in-game, as far as, you know, your city's capacity or the amount of players that you have that are fighting, right? At that point, it also kind of becomes psychological warfare, where it's really about mental fortitude throughout. And I'm sure people are hearing me say this, and they're like, wow, did you watch We Were Shoulders with Mel Gibson? And you're really getting into it right now. You got some whole Sun Tzu stuff going on. It pretty much is that. And, you know, again, if like I said, if you've never been in a situation where you've played in a server and you've literally put, you know, your blood, sweat, and tears into wanting to make that server work, and you knowing what the server has to do in order to get there, right? That people have to fight, they have to be willing to, right, to go out there and attack or defend and lose troops to get to that ideal state, right? You might just think to yourself, well, you know, I'll just take the easy road every single time, right? I'll let everyone else do the work and then just kind of reap the benefits. And sadly, even though it does pain me to say, that is a perspective that, you know, I would say, unfortunately, some players have, whether that is indirectly or directly, right? That can happen. So, anyways, those are a couple of the examples that you may find when you are looking at what some of the bigger long-term impacts are of rogue players and alliances. And it doesn't mean that your server cannot come out healthier or even better at the end of it, but it just means that it's going to be more challenging overall. Now, let me see what my next topic is here. I have to look at my outline, I always forget. Okay, so actually, before I even get there, because the next topic we're going to do is how can my server address and possibly deal with rogues. That's actually a really good topic, because I'll give a couple examples there for what my last project dealt with as well. But does anyone have any questions? Now we're going to open the floor up for any questions specifically on kind of short-term and long-term impacts of rogue players, or if you have a question there before we move on to the next topic. And then again, remember, for those that are still here, we will be taking real server examples. So if you are currently playing in a server, or if you have played in a server that has rogue players or alliances, and you want to ask for how you might be able to deal with that based on your current situation, I will be happy to give some advice and my suggestions on that, and we'll be doing that a little bit later in the show. But if anyone has a question now on what we just spoke about, which is, again, what are the short-term and long-term impacts of rogue players and alliances, you are more than welcome to ask. And then if you want to raise your hand, again, we'll call on any current members of the Discord. If you're new or if you're a visitor, we just kindly ask that you can join the server and ask your question in the voice channel chat. Also, the voice channel chat is there for people that would like to ask a question, but if you're just not in a position to where you can talk right now, then you're more than welcome to. I will give it about 30 seconds, and then we'll move on to the next topic, which I'm sure is going to be a great topic that a lot of people will want to know, which is, again, how can we actually address rogue players and alliances, and what can we do to combat them? Area said, we got rid of ours because of you. Oh, thank you. Oh, I am, I hope, I don't know if you ended up watching my, I don't know, well, I have a couple videos on my channel that talk about rogue player and alliance situations along with tips. I don't know if you're referring to, like, you watched some of those and you guys got some ideas on how to address it, but regardless, if it worked, that is awesome to hear. Sorry, let me see. Killswitch says, what if they have no reason... what if they have no reason to be rogue and just do it for fun and refuse to migrate? Also as a top whale. I mean, I would still categorize them as rogue. I mean, because they're, you know, again, it does depend. It does depend on what that current server is, right? If that current server has no structure, no organization, and you just have someone that's going around attacking people, then, you know, that falls down to the leaders that are there, right? That's their responsibility, and they're accountable for their inactions, or sorry, their actions or inactions, right? Because keep in mind, not doing something is a decision as well. So, yeah. I mean, but Killswitch, in that same regard, right? If you have someone who's just going around attacking people, and your players or your alliance leads are not coming together to try to address it, right? Then you know, then you can't even move forward because you're not even at the starting line. Right, you have to get to the starting line first, and to get to the starting line means that you need to have leads that come together that want to unify, whether it's unifying to face this common enemy, or if it's unifying to face this common enemy and also, you know, keep the direction of the server they have going. Right, you have to come together first before you can even come up with a game plan, and then actually start addressing the rogue player as well. But that's why I'm saying, if it's just a free-for-all server and, you know, there's no one there that has any form of structure or organization, and this person's just going around attacking people, right, then you could have the best game plan ever. You could have the best strategy for addressing them. But if you're not going to have the other strong players that are in that server backing you, along with the other leaders backing you as well, to make a group effort, it's going to just be that much more challenging, if not near impossible, depending on your specific situation. So that's why I'm saying you have to get to the starting line first before you can even apply any good practices. Let me see. Sorry. Oh, Area said I watched. You watched all three of them. Okay. It led into a lot of side switching after, though. Okay. Well, hey, if it worked out and you were able to adjust your rogues, you know, I think that's great. Anything that allows for the average player to have a better gaming experience, I am all for. All for. Let's see here. Let me see, give me one sec. Okay, so there's a couple more messages. Let me just read as I'm just perusing here. Let's see. Watch them all and more, deal with it. Oh, sorry, you said I meant more of how to deal with it. Okay. Yeah, so, and again, I'm going to give some specific examples on how to deal with that. Again, that's what my next topic is going to be about. I just wanted to try and answer this topic first before we kind of get into that, because I'm going to dive into some specific examples. I'll even provide some videos here in a sec on ones you can watch that Area was referring to as well, that will also dive more into different areas on how you can address rogues and come up with a good game plan, because I really go into pretty specific detail on how you can do that, and what we have found, and I'll also give a specific example of what we dealt with in server 36. So, well, actually, I'll give you an example on server 8 and 36. So, I don't know if I could give you an example on server 6, because server 6 was a little different. Well, actually, no, you know what? I'll give you an example on all three servers, because I think all three servers Oh, is this person going to attack this? Oh, I don't want to go and attack this if this person is doing it. That would be rude. But you know what? That's already too far for you, so. Oh, I'm already full. Okay. So let me move on then to, let's move on to the next topic, which is going to be finally, again, how to address rogues and alliances and or players, and then what can you actually do to pretty much get out of dodge and not have to worry so much about, oh, I think I have to go this way. Fantastic. About dealing with them, and what are some actual, real, tangible game plans that you can put into effect that will hopefully address them not only in the short term, but also have a good game plan for weeding them out. So that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to focus with starting out on, right, so let me give you an example first, because these examples are also going to give you answers as well. And then let me, if I can, oh, interesting. I think I did that already. Oh, fantastic. Okay. So let me just post a couple links here real quick so I can give a few examples on... Let me see. Let's go rogue. Where's my rogue videos here? Okay. So here's... I'm going to post these somewhat in order, but I'm going to put these in the server chat. And yo. Let me... Oh, gosh. I'm like hearing myself talk in the background. Okay. So there's one. There is a second. And then I think... You know what? There actually might be 4. I thought there was less, but I guess I do have 4. Okay. So I'll give these 4 video examples. They kind of all cover them, but I'm just going to post them here in the server chat. So let me start off with the... Let me start off with like the alliance example first. So if and I'll give you an example here from, actually no, I'm sorry, let me give you the individual player example first, then we'll work to the alliance. We'll kind of progress from there. So when we were in server 8, which was my first big jump project, right? We had eight alliances that went in there. We pretty much set up the foundation, or I should say I set up the foundation there in server 8 when we started. Right, we had, I think we did like a 2-2-3, or was it, I think it was a 2-2-3 at the time, and I'm sorry, a 2-3-3 for the faction split. And when we were there, we ended up coming across a alliance, and they, for whatever reason, right, just, you know, they just didn't care to be involved in the majority. Right, they didn't care. They didn't want there to be any management. Right, their belief was more of let's just let the server develop organically. And for those of you who've watched a lot of my videos, or if you've listened to me talk in these sessions, you know how I feel about servers developing organically. I do think there are some good areas that servers can develop organically in, but as far as letting the server develop how it is, that is code for. Yeah, we just don't want anyone to tell us what to do because we really just want to be number one and we want to go out and do whatever we want in the server unintended, right? So if they want to go and form a mega alliance or recruit all the strongest players, or if they want to go and attack anyone that they want, like, that's all that tells me, right? When you tell me you want the server to develop organically, all I'm hearing is you just have the worst or like the illest intentions for the server, whether that be indirectly or directly, right? It's like having no game plan. If you want to wing it, you know, out there, you know, while you're playing chess or while you're surfing, that's cool. That's fine. You know, feel free to go and, you know, swim in the area that has the most infested sharks. You know, don't let me stop you. But yeah, so I'm totally not a fan of that when someone tells me, I just want the server to develop organically. It's so much deeper of a meaning. Right, where they're just like, don't boss me around, I'm just going to do whatever I want. Yeah, no, that's the biggest red flag that I would ever see or hear from someone. So, anyways, there you go, Tristan. So, also, on a side note, Queen's Gambit, if no one's watched Queen's Gambit on Netflix, fantastic chess show, which is absolutely amazing. But anyways, so again, the example that we had in Server 8 is we had an alliance that the majority of players, and this typically happens, where the majority of players did not necessarily want to fight. But the leader, the officers, and some of just the more loud-spoken individual members of the Alliance wanted to PvP. We got wind of this early. So this is what happens when you have a good information network set up, right? When you can reach out to players and you build trust and loyalty through your actions, this can put you in people's favor. And so, because I was proactive, along with some of our other members, that we established communication with other leads within the first few days of the server, we got wind early on because we had pretty much contacts in almost in every of the top alliances, even for ones that were not part of our family. Why? Because we showed people that we actually had a game plan. We explained our game plan to people, and they understood it. Regardless if they agreed with it or not, right, they at least appreciated the fact that we went out of our way to tell people, like, look, hey, we're not here to take everything, right? We're here to support the server by just providing some actual structure to it. And that's something you'll find more often than not, people respect that, and they appreciate that. And so because of that, we got wind early from people that sent me screenshots of some people within this alliance, of them sending mails out and having general alliance chat talks, of them going rogue, right? Or them basically saying, like, look, we're not going to follow what this group is going to do here, right? We'll wait until we hit T3 troops at level at Castle 20, and then we're going to go and fight, right? So it basically just said, the lead just said, look, gather your strength. We're going to fight them at a later time. We have no intentions of playing nice. So the moment that we got word of that, we saw that it came from the horse's mouth. It was confirmed. We then decided, you know what, we're going to set up we're going to do this, we're going to set up this impromptu assault on this alliance. So what we did was, even before we did that, we messaged all of the players that were in that alliance ahead of time, right? We gave them like a 24-hour notice. We didn't say what we were going to do, but we told them, we said, look, you know, we put like a copy-paste template message together, and we, in short, said, like, look, your alliance leadership is planning, right? Or if your alliance leadership is planning to go to war and to fight, you know, just know that that's something that you may be in danger of. And we just want to let you know ahead of time that, right, if you stay in this alliance under the current leadership, right, then, you know, anything could happen. There's a chance you might get attacked or other players may get attacked at a time. And, you know, we just explained to them, like, look, your leader has decided for you that he wants to take your alliance to war. Regardless if you agree with that or not, right, by you being in this alliance and your leader sending out the, you know, alliance mails or messages saying such, right, you may now be in face of, you know, unintended consequences, right, that may come your way. So in short, we pretty much we messaged all the players ahead of time and said that. And then the next day, we launched like a 5 or 6 alliance assault on them, where we raided like their 2 hives, and then for the next 48 hours we did nothing but just attack their players nonstop. And, you know, we used our alliance markers pretty much as our bounty board. Which now, thankfully, with the Alliance group chats, it makes it a lot easier to do that. You can separate those conversations. But before, we would be using markers, and we would just constantly update markers. Like, our officer teams were great. They were constantly editing, taking down, placing new markers on any new players. We were just hunting them like wolves. And so, once the 48-hour mark came up, we got wind that the current leader stepped down. And then a new leader took his place, and the guy in short basically just said, like, look guys, I'm just not having fun anymore. I don't want to play here. Well, sure, you're not having fun. You're getting attacked 24/7, right? Because you declared war. Like, what did you think was going to happen? So, anyways, leadership switched. Right, and keep in mind, during this time, right, we like immediately were sieging their cities, right? We had a plan where a couple of alliances took their cities while the other ones were actually attacking the players, their hives. So it was a pretty big coordinated effort that we did, and there's a video on it. I don't know if I posted it, but it's whichever one was in S8. I think these are like S36 examples. Right, but that's one way that you can go about cutting the fat out early and putting a lot of pressure on one alliance, right? Where you work together with your groups to take cities away. You constantly level those cities up one by one, where you kind of have one alliance working on one at each. You're constantly attacking them 24/7, putting just all day pressure on them, right? By using your alliance group chats, your markers to constantly mark players. In addition to that, right? You can do things like messaging their players. I often find that you might get a few defectors that way. If you message all their players and you let them know, like, look, this is the direction the server is going in, right? Your alliance leadership just wants to do nothing but attack, right? That's just going to cause more players to leave or become inactive, and right, we're going to fight for what we believe in. And you may find that you may pick up some defectors that way. We did. So again, messaging all the players, letting them know what's happening, right? If you run like propaganda messages in World Chat or Kingdom Chat, every 30 or 60 minutes, whatever, you may do, if you find that might be beneficial, right? That's another route you could take too. If your server's a little more developed, then you can start utilizing server mail, right, to let players know what's happening, right? Give them a breakdown of the current situation. You can assign negative titles to players as well that are in those alliances. Typically the ones that are probably the most active would be ideal. Right, and those are some ways that you can go about dealing in general with one and or even multiple alliances. Right, the thing to keep in mind, and I talk about this in a couple of the videos that I posted, is that right, when you're dealing with one or even 2, 3 alliances, and you have 2 to 3 to 4 times that amount, the smaller group is going to tap out faster than the larger group is, right? Now, when I say tap out, does anyone have an idea of what I mean by that? Right? Why would a smaller group, whether it be of just players or of alliances that are rogue, right? How would they tap out faster before the larger group does? Does anyone have an idea on what I mean by that? To refresh this. Okay, looks like there's a few people typing right now. Let's see. I'm just gonna wait to see if anyone has. And again, if you'd like to ask a question over voice, you're more than welcome to raise your hand. We just ask that as long as you're a current member, you ask. Mm-hmm. That's 20. All right, let's see here. Oops, I probably did. Okay, let's see. Someone asked, sorry, Killswitch said, okay, there's a couple here. I mean, could be a lot of things, low activity being smaller anyways, along with even less rewards chests, RSS buffs, etc. On top of the rogue issue, it would be activity, rewards chests, RSS buffs. It would be easy for smaller alliances to decide it's not worth a lot faster than someone in top alliance gaining a lot more and a much better environment. Okay. Area said they can't take any more cities once they lost their members with such that they have nowhere to go, or sorry, nowhere to farm anymore. If you have the bigger guys on your side, it also easy to farm them down. Tell your players to shield or get spread out as far as possible. If the rogues are only having a few big guys, get them involved in fights. Yeah, so I would say both of those responses are more or less pretty spot on. The big reason is you're essentially starving them out. The thing you have to look at is that there are a lot of limitations in the game as far as soft caps. So one example would be you running out of AP. Right, if you run out of your daily free AP, and let's say you run out of your AP pots, you're going to have to purchase more or get them elsewhere. If you are on the smaller side of a group, or even if you're just one alliance or a few players worth, you are only going to be able to attack other players or attempt to re-siege cities so often. It'll probably start off with you retaking cities or attacking players pretty often in the beginning because you still are full on your resources for the most part. But over a period of time, after you get to a week, 2-3 weeks in, that is when you're going to start, and I'm talking when you're still kind of in this war or in this fight, that is when you're going to start noticing the difference between players in the smaller group that are starting to run out of resources, because you'll then start seeing that they're taking cities less often. They're most likely attacking players less often because they're either not using AP or they've ran out. And because of that, they're not sieging cities as often because of the amount of AP it takes. Right, so there's pressure that's being applied both ways. Right, that's the big thing to really understand, is that when you are fighting against rogue players and or up to multiple, anywhere from 1 to multiple alliances, right, the disadvantages are already with the smaller group, with the rogues themselves, right? They're already starting out at a disadvantage. It's just that you won't see these effects until a certain amount of time has passed. And I'll give you an example. If we fast forward to S36, which you can see there's some videos that I posted here in the voice channel chat, why our group ran into more of a outlier situation, because there was a group of players that actually came to S36 with the sole intention of, ruining my efforts in that server. So it was pretty intense, very different than probably what most servers would experience. Now, even though they came into the server with this mindset, they did not actually accomplish their goal by themselves at all. They were far from it. The only reason why S36 turned out the way it did is because we had two of our, I think it was the number 1 and number 3 or number 1 and number 4 alliance at the time, right? It was two of our top family alliances that decided to go neutral, which meant that they essentially left the family. And part of it was also, as I've mentioned before, right, factors into the knowledge and the experience level, along with the age, and I would say maturity, of leaders, right, of R6s that are in those positions, because not everyone is going to have the same baseline level of knowledge or experience. They're not all going to deal with certain situations the same. Not all of them may have ever been truly challenged in a server where they will know how to deal with these things. Maybe they've never came across a situation where they've actually had to fight in a server, or even fight for a period of time longer than they anticipated. And I think with these two leads being just a little bit younger, and them not having necessarily as much experience and knowledge on some of these things as some of our other leads did, along with some of the other factors that went into it, right, those are things that cause them to then go neutral. Now, the short version is that, right, and you can see this from some of the videos I posted, is that when, we basically applied a lot of the same tactics that I just briefly spoke about for what we did in S8. We just did it on a grander scale because there was just more features that were available to us. So we utilized server mail. We set up alliance group chats that basically were blacklist channels. So players were just doing nothing but posting chords in those. That was all you saw in those group channels, in those group chats. And players could go and look through those group chats, and they would just see the most updated or most recently posted coordinates on players, and they would just go and attack them, right? And the only thing we really ever asked is that you would just try to port out one person a day, right? Which is nothing, right? That could be 4 or 5 hits, 4 to 6 hits, 3 to 6 hits, right, for a player. So you're not using a lot of AP, and it's a pretty realistic ask, where it's not too high demanding, especially on your free to play. So we did things like that. We were constantly taking cities away. We even timed out when certain events ended. So like the City Siege event, right, which ends, right, it's like the first 2 weeks of your server. Then you have Supreme Alliance, which is like the first 3 weeks of your server. We timed it out where just before reset, when these events ended, we went in and took away a certain amount of cities from these rogue alliances, therefore lowering the tier level of rewards they could get. Right? These were things that we did that were on such a grander, on a bigger level of strategy to factor into just additional compounding effects to demoralize them. So after we started doing that, and then we started taking away more cities. Now, keep in mind, they started out with, in this example, they started out with 3 alliances. So different than the S8 situation, because the S8 situation was really just 1 alliance. These were 3 alliances worth, but it was really 1 alliance, and they basically were able to get 2 other alliances on their side early on. So they started out as 3 alliances. We put all of these protocols and policies into effect, along with having an organized Discord server. We even had a rapid response team set up, which was compiled of the top 50 strongest troop power players in the server, albeit any of the rogue alliances for players they had in those that wanted to go change. And so, we set this up. And go get it. And so what we ended up doing from there is now it started where they had these 3 alliances, and then it ended up dwindling down to 2 because they started losing activity. They started realizing that their players were being targeted 24/7. They started burning through a lot of their resources, and so they dwindled from 3 alliances to 2, and then eventually from 2 alliances to 1. And then about half of the players in this 1 alliance were pretty active, but we were able to eliminate their opportunity to get more cities, right? Because you need to have an alliance established, right, if you want to go out and capture cities. So now now they were only able to get 1/3 of the potential cities because they all had to pretty much condense into 1 alliance because they kept losing activity. And then what ended up happening is we started going after, right? We were doing a decent amount of city trading for about a week and a half. And then eventually it came down to the capital cities, or specifically one level 5 capital city, and where one of our alliances captured it. And then a couple days later, the Rogue Alliance came in to recapture it. And then, and even though there was an attempt to defend, and it was pretty close, they still were successful. Now, this doesn't really prove anything for the most part, because, you're right, it's always about, who's going to win the war, not necessarily individual skirmishes, right? But by them capturing that, it gave them, a little bit of a morale boost. So what we did is, I think this was about 2 days later, we organized a family kind of server-wide assault because they pretty much were hiving around the city. What they did, though, is that they were actually hiving about 3 tiles away, so they were outside of the yellow zone, therefore allowing them to still shield if necessary. And so what we did is we actually sandwiched them. So when we did our assault, we had the alliance that was planned to take the city in the middle. And then we had players that were able to pick and choose their battles by lining up on the outside. So you could, players would click on their opponents ahead of time. They would see which ones they had a higher troop power against or even close to, and then they would line up next to them, right? So there was a lot of advantages. Again, as I said, and always more disadvantages when you are the rogue group, whether it be players or alliances. And so we then did a siege on the city, and we had so much power and so much activity that showed up and engagement from players that showed up. But the challenge is that even though we took the wall down, we took the garrison down extremely fast, and we were constantly attacking them. And I think a couple of our top guys ended up getting, like 500 to 700 honor just because the rogue players that were being ported out, they kept teleporting back in, because all they were doing was just trying to defend the garrisons. And so what ended up happening is that it came down, I think, to like the last minute, and they ended up actually defending and holding it off. Now, the reason they did was really from, I would say, my own oversight on forgetting to add a line item in to the server mail, the Discord announcement, along with the template we provided for alliances to send alliance mails out, where I forgot to add in saying, this is the alliance that will last hit the garrisons. Stop attacking them once they are at 3 garrisons, right? 2 to 3 garrisons, I think we said. And because I forgot to say that, you ended up having a lot of people from our family alliances that were all attacking the garrisons, right? And you have to have a majority of the garrisons in order to take over the city. So what we did then, right, is even though we had a great showing, right, our opponents burned a lot of troops, we attacked a lot of them, and a lot of our top guys got a lot of honor, we ran it back the next day. So the next day we came back, right, we added in this simple line item, which was very easy to do. And then everyone resent alliance mails out. We all coordinated a time, and we attempted the siege again. And guess what happened? We took the city in probably 2 or 3 minutes, right? Because we made a very simple adjustment, and we were able to organize more efficiently. And after that happened, right? And this is why I'm telling you this story, because it's all going to make sense here in a moment. Is that after this happened and we retook this capital city, we were then able to, we then started realizing that over the next few days, activity in their alliance started dropping significantly, right? They had not attempted to take another city in those few days. They were barely attacking our players from the daily reports that we were seeing. And we had pretty much struck a dagger through them that was demoralizing them more now than it had in the beginning, because of all the compounding effects, them realizing that they're not going to be able to have a capital city, they're not going to get gold generation, they're constantly being attacked, and they're probably depleted on resources. So all of those things are where you can get to, but you have to persevere to that point. So, in short, after we started noticing that this happened, the only reason why the success did not fully convert to this being the end for that alliance is because there was a small group of defectors from our alliance, which we later, or from our family, which we later found out was caused by, I should say, mostly caused by 2 officers from one of the top alliances that were breeding and kind of spreading cancerous deceit amongst some of the players in their alliance and others, because they wanted more PvP. So they felt that they were right. Like, they wanted to have server-wide PvP. Because of that, some players, some of the top troop power players in the server that were from this family alliance left, and they went to go join this rogue alliance. Now, I'm sure you can see the psychological candle that has been lit at this point, right? You went from pretty much finishing off the alliance to now you've given them just a glimmer of hope. And so because of that, they ended up becoming a little more motivated, and then they started switching up their sauce and started aggressively reaching out to leaders in other alliances, and were threatening them, telling them that if they didn't go neutral and stop fighting against them, that they were going to start attacking them. Not realizing that the people in the server, right, we are the majority, right? We pretty much had the entire server organized, going against this one now only one rogue alliance. So, right, for you to be mentally and verbally threatened by one alliance, which is really down on their dumps, or I don't know if it's dumps or lumps, whatever it may be, right? But they're just down in general, and you actually feel some sense of threat from them when you are still in the majority. That was the first baffling moment to me, because it just didn't make sense. And right, it's almost like you have a successful Fortune 500 company. Why are you going to go join this new startup right? Right. If the startup is threatening your territory, right? Like you're the majority company. That would be like some startup threatening Microsoft or Amazon, right? Like you're not going to fold under that pressure logically. So, anyways, in short, they started going around and threatening alliance leaders, not only in the server, but they actually came on our server Discord and started threatening players, leaders on there as well, telling them that if they didn't leave I think they called it like the coalition, but just the group, or just better yet, if they didn't go neutral and stop attacking them, then this rogue alliance was going to start attacking those other alliances or non-family alliances as well. And over time, that ended up getting a lot of the non-family alliances to basically just come out and say, okay, we're neutral, we're not supporting anyone, we're not going to attack you or anyone on the server. And over time, that eventually led to two of our family alliances, as I mentioned to before, going neutral. And I'll wrap this up short so I can get to the other example, which is like the rogue player example, and then we'll take some questions too. Is after this happened, we then got the genius idea that I had proposed, which is, hey, why don't all of our alliances go neutral too? Right? Because at that point, what are they going to do? Right? If everyone goes neutral, who are they going to fight? So the hilarious part is they didn't think about that. Right? We ended up getting screenshots that were sent to us later where they then realized that, okay, well, hey, everyone's neutral. So if we start attacking people now, then they're just going to be seen as the really worst guy, and right, or if they don't care. And then the hope was maybe the server would see that, okay, well, they don't really care about anything, so why are you folding into their demands? So anyways, the short version is that it was funny to see that play out, and you can see that in some of the videos that I posted above in the voice channel chat. But the main takeaway here is that in one of the videos that we posted, which was from kind of this one-time impromptu town hall that they ended up doing, which was recorded, and you can actually hear from one of the officers that was in this rogue alliance. They came out and stated that the moment that I referred to after we retook the capital, and the days after that was actually true for everything I said in one of my videos before that, which is this was our opportunity to really crush them and just to keep the pedal, right, just to keep our foot on the gas and not let up. And they actually admitted that was true. That was their down moment of weakness, where they were really demoralized, and everything I had commented about the thoughts on the situation was accurate. And so it's a little bit of a sour taste, because it tells you that, and this is, I'm sure, an example a lot of other people can relate to, is that you might be in a server where you were so close, or you were right there to defeating, the rogue alliances, or the one alliance, or the rogue player that was causing nothing but havoc, right? But something just happened that was out of your control, for the most part, that just didn't allow for you to get there. Now let me give you the rogue alliance the rogue player example. So in server 8, we had a rogue player there as well. Shout out to my boy Bad Warrior. And dealing with a rogue player, I think, is a little bit easier than necessarily dealing with alliances, right, depending on how strong the player is. But let me give you an example of things you can do even if the player is extremely powerful. Let's say they're like the #1 true powered player on the server. If your server is unified, then the easy thing is you just keep kicking them out of alliances. Just don't let them get into a top alliance, right? That's probably one of the biggest impacts that you can have, because one, they're not going to get access to rewards, any additional purchases that other people make. They're also not going to get access to alliance tech buff increases. They're not going to get access to resources that you're taxing from the cities, right, that they can collect on a daily basis. They're not going to be able to build up alliance credits, right, if they want to be able to purchase passports at a later time. And so that's, some of the biggest things, and they'll always be tagless. Again, that's probably the first thing that you would do. The second thing is you would use negative titles, and you'd pretty much give them a negative title, whether that be the gathering speed, or if it's, oh god, I can't remember what some of the other ones are. But essentially, you would give them a negative title that would be specific to their situation, based on what they're doing in your server. And then, you'd send some server mails out, some alliance mails out. You would let players know. Also, don't hive. I know Araya had mentioned that before. That's one of the biggest things that we talk about a lot in our servers when we're educating people on PvP tips, which is that you never want to hive, right? The only time you should ever be hiving if you're in a server that has a very active or aggressive rogue player or alliances is you never hive. Right, you always stay 20 to 40 kilometers apart from another player. The only time you would actually ever hive, and you should always cut it down to the smallest window possible, is when you're going to go and siege a city. Right, so if you're going to try and retake a city or go and attack a city, this is when you would actually hive. But you would really only want to do it about 30 minutes before you are going to siege the city. So you would tell players essentially to move close in the province, and then they would start relocating within 30 minutes, right? So you would make sure that they're within 30 minutes of relocating to that city, and then they would click relocate, right, within that 30-minute window. Those are things that you can do when you are trying to avoid getting attacked. In addition, some other things that we did a lot. Okay, so I'm just reading your thing right now, sorry, let me look at the voice channel. Okay, yeah, so Killswitch has a good point as well. This is something that we did, right, where if you have, right, you find some players or officers in your alliance, and you just monitor the whales, right, or you monitor the rogue alliances. And what you'll do is you just write their names down, and then you monitor what their active times are and what their sleep times are. This will allow for you to be more efficient when you decide that you want to siege. So when we were in S36, we always took cities and we always attacked players when the majority of them were offline because we were tracking the data. We had a spreadsheet and we had players that were very proactive and because we were online, right? So we had group chats that were set up where if we had a group of 4 or 5 people that were monitoring players, we would write the names down and we would say this player's name, they're online right now. And then anytime they got offline for, let's say, more than 2 or 3 hours, right, we would take note of when they got offline, and then we would start compounding that data over consecutive days to make sure that the information lined up. And then now we would start putting together timelines for their active window versus their inactive windows. In addition to that, we actually had spies that were in their alliance, so we were able to have people that actually got the best data because they could see the green little dot for when they were online versus the people that were offline, right? So we actually were able to pull that data immediately from them, even without having to do it manually, right, or from outside of the alliance. So again, that's another fantastic tip to take away, is you can monitor that information and you can devise and come up with strategies on how to avoid the fights, but also take advantage of just constantly putting pressure on them. Trust me, over a period of time, right, the only situation I will tell you that is really the hardest, probably the most challenging situation to really overcome is the one where you have a whale that's in your server, a rogue whale that's in your server, and they're just like 40 or 50k troop power above the second place person, right? Those are really in my opinion, that probably would be the most difficult or the hardest situation to overcome if there's just such an extreme power gap. Now, it doesn't mean that it's impossible. You can still apply a lot of these best practices, if not most, to put pressure on them. The only challenge is that the problem is that the wider the power gap, the less dead and hospital bill that the whale is going to take, right? Especially if they're garrisoning with their strongest march, right? The closer you get in power, the more dead and the more seriously wounded they'll take. So it's usually easier, right? Even if they're 10k above you, they could be 5, 10k, maybe even 15k above. And as long as you have the second, third, and fourth strongest players, right, troop power-wise, that are within that margin, you still will wound, and they'll take a little bit of dead. But it's just a matter of you all have to attack at the same time. Eventually, you'll whittle down the garrison to where you'll start getting victories. You'll start getting, your opponent will start getting, or the rogue will start taking higher hospital bills or higher seriously wounded and more dead. And eventually, once you start being able to win against the garrison, that's when you basically take that opportunity when they're offline, if they're not bubbling, to then just hit them nonstop for those next 6 to 8 hours, right? However long they're going to be offline, to do as much damage as you can. And also by just keeping the prosperity low, that's another good thing. But typically, you know, with whales, they'll probably just regem the prosperity anyways, the moment that they wake up. But those are just things that you can do to also put some pressure in that regard. So, anyways, guys, give me one moment. I should be right back.
All right. Oh,
All right, thanks for waiting, everyone. Just had to go and take care of some real quick. That was unfortunately unavoidable. So yeah, let me see where we're at, just because I'm gonna have to round this out. I think probably in the next couple minutes. I wasn't expecting to probably be here for so long, but let me see what some might have posted here. Area said greatest weakness of rogues are always their friends that are small. Yeah, no, that's the truth. And I think also the fact that you can't transfer resources. Right, I don't know if it's something that they're going to add into the game, but I do think that the fact that you can't transfer resources is actually another really big win so far for dealing with that as well. Because I remember playing, I remember playing other games where, you would have your, gosh, well, I mean, you can't really transfer. You can gift. And I guess technically, if your whale goes and attacks some of your members, then yeah, I guess you could. Or if your whale allows themselves to be attacked with no garrison, then yeah, maybe you could do it that way. But as far as an actual, non-fighting mechanic way to transfer actual resources, right, you can't do that. And I also think that's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of RSS sellers in IK. As prominent, because there's no way to transfer. The only way they could do it is by farming, and then you'd have to attack the city, right, to get the resources. So I think that's another hard cap on limiting how much a whale can do, right? And so once it's all about, sometimes it's just cutting off the supply chain in this regard when it comes to also defeating whales, right? If they don't have any activity in the alliance they're in, right, that can also be demoralizing. Along with, most of the time, the reason why you would even have a whale that would be actively fighting like that is usually just a short-term enjoyment for them. More often than not, they'll typically come on, right, they'll do their attacks, and, depending on how engaged they are, but usually there's always a threshold, right? Whether it's a week or 2 weeks, or if it's a month, right, depending on how long they really want to go, right, there's always different forms of pressure that you can apply to them. Yeah, no, and I think that's true as well. For what Killswitch said is that get a hair tie. Oh, here. And so the thing here, give me. And so I think the other thing to take note of is that again you can RSS bleed, right? I mean, even if they are doing max purchases, right, there's still the opportunity that you can. It's just, to do something like that, you would really have to, you would have to be really persistent, and on top of that, you would really need to have a second or even a third player, but a second at least, or essentially just one other that could challenge the whale or be close to their troop power with their primary march in order to really apply those effects, as far as with the constant pressure, them constantly having to train troops and do nothing but that, right? So that way you'd be feeling the same effect. So to an extent, yes. No, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, by you having, I think the interesting thing is that, right, even if you're a whale or you're a heavy spender, right, to an extent, you may still have a budget, right? Right, or you may have close. You may have an amount of money that you just don't value. Typically, if you're a whale or you spend a lot, right, you're probably somewhat decent with your finances. So there sometimes can be a threshold that you may not even want to personally exceed. And if you're constantly fighting or being pressured, you most likely are going to have to fight more, and because of that, you'll have to probably pay more money. So, like I said, I think there's a lot of effects and areas that can be utilized in different fields when it comes to addressing and kind of dealing with those rogue players and or alliances. So, yeah. I know, sweetie. But anyways, guys, look, that is, or I should say, guys and gals, that's going to be it for me today. I was actually hoping to try and wrap this up a little sooner, as far as a few minutes ago, so I could have attempted to get to some of those questions that you guys had. But I'll definitely going to not forget about that, and we'll make an opportunity for, which I'll probably do at a later time. Whether it be next week or the week after, we'll definitely do something where we specifically have players be able to give examples of their situations for that you have, so we can try and do that. Well, the reason why we do this is because if we just did a standard voice channel, because I don't necessarily have Discord perms switch, what we found, and this is pretty much what happened when we tried to do it the first time, I think it was the first or the second time that we did it, is you're always going to have trolls that come on, and they'll just yell on the mic, or they'll say profane, they'll say profane things, or they'll just be very, very rude and irresponsible. So doing it this way limits it, because then people can't just get on the mic and say whatever they want. And we usually now always have at least one mod that's on during the time that I'm here. So even if, because we've already had a couple situations where people will just post, I don't know if it's memes, but they would post, just not nice things, even just spamming it in the chat. So again, by having someone here, by having a mod here, they can deal with that as well. And usually anytime I even call someone on to talk, I always right-click their name immediately, and I'll always hover over the move back to audience. So the moment that I get an inkling of them going off the rails, which has happened like twice so far, it hasn't actually happened for the past couple shows, because I try to be as quick as I can when someone starts to go down that route, and I'll just move them right back to the audience. So that's also why we put the other restriction of not allowing for people that are new to Discord, because you can see it when someone requests to talk, if they're new to Discord, or if they're God, what is it? It's like new to Discord, or if they're a visitor, right? And you always have visitors or new to Discord people that want to ask to come on the mic, and that's because there's usually always a group of people that are just going around to stage channels and wanting to troll them. So, which I already immediately knew the moment that we were going to do the stage channel idea like this, that could be a possibility. So it's it's better to do it this way, trust me when I say in the farthest regard. But anyways, look, guys and gals, with all of that being said, I want to just thank everyone for tuning in. I appreciate, especially, I know we always have a lot of frequent, consistent people that are here week to week. I hope that you all enjoy the content and just the perspective that I provide when we talk about these different topics, and I'm glad that we have a good amount of people that usually always interact, whether, for the most part, it being in the voice channel chat, along with a few every once in a while coming on voice. And like I said, I'm not going to forget about doing this next week or the week after, where we'll give players an opportunity to submit your examples, or even just talk about your examples in voice for what you deal with and what you go through on a daily basis in your server, or what you've dealt with, so I can try to give maybe some more specific examples and helps for what you can do there. But I hope I at least covered a lot of the different examples, like I talked about, the one alliance, the multiple alliance, and the individual players, on how you can go about addressing them in your server. And as you can see from even someone here, right, with Araya, who mentioned, right, they took some of the examples and advice that I provided, and they were able to apply it to their server, right, of course, in hopes that it did work, which is awesome to hear. And for me, that's always the biggest thing. I'm just happy enough to share some of my knowledge, some of my experience, and my insight, in hopes that it will allow for you as an individual to have a better overall gaming experience, along with your server hopefully stabilizing, or at least staying healthy, right, where morale is still high, and you're able to enjoy your time playing there. So with that being said, that's it for me. Again, I am going to go ahead and just end my recording now, so I can work on this upload. So again, the VOD will be up a little bit later today, I'll have it up later today, probably in a couple hours or by this afternoon. But again, I'll go ahead and just end the stage. I appreciate everyone who came to listen in, whether it is morning, afternoon, or evening for you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and then until next week, everyone, take care. Okay, let's go.